The morning had started like any other in our quiet suburban neighborhood. Birds chirped on the trees lining the sidewalks, sprinklers hissed across well-trimmed lawns, and the smell of fresh coffee filled our kitchen. My wife Emily was humming to herself as she flipped pancakes for the kids. It should have been a perfect, ordinary day. But that's the thing about living under the HOA. Ordinary could turn into chaos in the blink of an eye. When I stepped outside to grab the morning paper, I noticed something taped to our front door. At first glance, it looked like one of those community notices. Maybe about landscaping or garbage schedules, but when I peeled it off, bold red letters screamed back at me. HOA violation notice. $250 fine. My stomach tightened. I flipped the paper over and scanned the details. The violation: Emily had left her car parked in front of the house overnight instead of in the driveway. A ridiculous rule, if you asked me, but the HOA was notorious for nitpicking. Still, $250 for a car parked on the street. That was insane. I handed the letter to Emily when I came back inside. She barely looked at it. "Not again," she muttered, rolling her eyes. "They fine us for breathing too loudly. I'm not paying this, I said carefully. "They'll keep escalating it. You know how Karen is." Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA board. Everyone in the neighborhood called her HOA Karen because she treated the community like her personal kingdom. Rules were rules, but with her, it was more like a weapon she wielded to control everyone. Emily folded her arms. "I don't care. This is harassment. I'm ignoring it." I didn't argue. Part of me even admired her defiance, but in the back of my mind, I knew Karen wouldn't let this slide. She thrived on confrontation. Sure enough, the next day, Emily found another letter. This one was harsher. Final notice before escalation. Emily laughed, tossed it in the trash, and went on with her day. But Karen must have been watching, because later that evening, as we sat on the porch enjoying the sunset, a white SUV pulled up across the street. Karen stepped out, clipboard in hand, her face twisted in smug satisfaction. She marched toward us. "You've been warned," she snapped, waving her clipboard like it was a badge of authority. "If you don't pay that fine, I'll call the police for non-compliance." Emily didn't even flinch. "Do it," she said coolly. "I'd love to see how the cops feel about you wasting their time over a parked car." Karen's face went crimson. "Don't test me." But Emily had already turned her back, guiding the kids inside. I stayed quiet, though every nerve in my body buzzed with unease. The next day, the inevitable happened. Red and blue lights flashed outside our home. A police cruiser rolled up, and an officer stepped out. Karen followed closely behind, arms crossed and smirking like she had already won. The officer approached me. "Sir, we received a complaint from the HOA about unpaid fines." Before I could answer, Emily appeared at the door. The officer looked up and froze. His eyes widened, his mouth slightly open. Then, in a voice of disbelief, he whispered, "Judge, it's you?" For a moment, the street fell silent. Even the crickets seemed to stop chirping. The police officer's words hung in the air like a thundercloud ready to burst. Emily froze on the porch steps, one hand gripping the railing, her eyes flickering between me and the officer. Karen, standing behind him with her arms folded in smug satisfaction, tilted her head in confusion. "Judge," she repeated, her tone sharp. "What do you mean, Judge? He's just another homeowner. He broke the rules, and you're here to enforce them." The officer didn't move. His eyes remained locked on me. "Sir, forgive me. But are you Judge Harris from the county courthouse?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I serve on the bench downtown, but here, I'm just another resident officer." Karen's jaw dropped. She blinked rapidly, then shook her head as if trying to reset her brain. Wait, you're a judge. Since when?" Emily crossed her arms, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Since long before you started handing out ridiculous fines, Karen." The officer cleared his throat. suddenly looking uncomfortable. He straightened his posture, but the deference in his eyes was unmistakable. Your Honor, I didn't realize. This was reported as a community violation, but... Karen stepped in, jabbing a finger toward Emily. It is a violation. She ignored a legally binding HOA fine, and you're required to enforce it. Judge or no judge, the law applies to everyone. I raised an eyebrow, my tone calm but firm. Karen, an HOA fine isn't criminal law, it's a civil matter. Police officers are not debt collectors, and you know that. The officer shifted uncomfortably. She's right, ma'am. HOA fines are civil penalties. We don't get involved unless there's a disturbance of the peace or a court order. I really shouldn't be here for this. Emily let out a small laugh, shaking her head. Told you. Karen's face burned red. This is absurd. You're all conspiring against me. He's only saying that because you're some fancy judge. The officer sighed, his voice firm now. Ma'am, with all due respect, I know my jurisdiction. This is not a police matter. If the HOA wants to pursue it, they can file in small claims court. Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes darted around as though searching for backup, but the only audience was a couple of neighbors peeking through their curtains. I took a step forward. Karen, you've overstepped. You've wasted police resources, harassed my family, and intimidated this entire neighborhood. I've seen enough complaints cross my desk from HOA disputes to know exactly what this is, abuse of power. The officer nodded slowly, clearly uncomfortable being caught in the middle. I'm sorry for the disturbance, Your Honor. I'll be on my way. Karen sputtered, pointing wildly at me. This isn't over. You can't hide behind your title forever. The HOA has rules, and I'll make sure you follow them. Emily leaned against the doorway, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Good luck with that, Karen. As the cruiser pulled away, Karen stormed back to her SUV, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, but I knew her fury wasn't going to fade. In fact, something told me this was just the beginning. Because people like Karen didn't lose quietly, they doubled down. And sure enough, I was right. The neighborhood should have gone back to normal after that night. The police officer had left. The matter was settled. Or so I thought. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to walk away in silence. No, she thrived on control. And I had just humiliated her in front of the very people she ruled over. The next morning, I noticed a stack of flyers shoved into every mailbox on our street. Emily brought one inside, her brow furrowed. The headline read in bold black letters, "No one is above the rules, not even a judge." Beneath it was a rant clearly written by Karen accusing my family of arrogance, special treatment, and setting a bad example for the community. She made it sound like Emily's parked car was the end of civilization as we knew it. Emily crumpled the flyer in her fist. She's lost her mind. I sighed, rubbing my temples. This is her way of saving face. Ignore it. The neighbors will see right through it. But ignoring Karen was easier said than done. Later that afternoon, I overheard whispers when I went to get the mail. Two neighbors, standing by their hedges, glanced at me and quickly looked away. Another neighbor muttered something about favoritism as I walked past. Karen had planted her seeds of doubt, and some people were buying it. That evening, she upped the ante. A loud knock echoed at our door. Emily answered, only to find Karen standing there with a clipboard and a tight smile. I've scheduled an emergency HOA board meeting, she announced, her voice dripping with fake politeness. Attendance is mandatory. We'll be discussing certain homeowners who believe they're above the community bylaws. Her eyes flicked toward me as she said it. I stepped into the doorway. Karen, holding a meeting to target my family is harassment. Careful how far you push this. Her smile didn't waver. Careful how far you push it, Judge. The board votes, not you. And trust me, by the end of the week, you'll regret ignoring me. She turned on her heel and strutted off, her heels clicking against the pavement. Emily closed the door behind her, frustration written all over her face. She's obsessed. What's her problem with us? I hesitated before answering. Truth was, Karen hated anyone who challenged her authority. And after last night, I hadn't just challenged her, I'd embarrassed her. The so-called emergency meeting took place 2 days later in the community clubhouse. Emily and I walked in to find nearly every homeowner present. Karen sat at the front of the room, gavel in hand like she was presiding over a courtroom. As you all know, she began, her voice projecting across the room. Our community only thrives when rules are respected. But lately, we've had residents, prominent residents, who think they're exempt. Murmurs spread through the room. Some people glanced at me, others avoided my eyes. I raised a hand. Karen, this isn't the Supreme Court. You can't put us on trial for ignoring one parking. Fine. Her eyes gleamed. Oh, but I can. And I'll prove to everyone here that even a judge has to play by the rules, or face the consequences. The room fell silent, the tension so thick you could feel it pressing down on your shoulders. For the first time, I realized Karen wasn't just after compliance, she was after revenge, and she was willing to drag the entire neighborhood into her war to get it. The clubhouse smelled faintly of old coffee and disinfectant, but tonight it felt more like a courtroom than a community space. Karen sat at the front table with her gavel, eyes glinting with triumph. Behind her, 3 HOA board members shifted nervously in their seats, clearly unsure whether they'd signed up to manage lawns and fences or host public trials. The room buzzed with whispers, until Karen slammed the gavel down. Bang! The sound echoed like a judge calling a case to order. This emergency meeting is now in session, she announced. The matter at hand, one homeowner's repeated disregard for our community bylaws and fines. Emily leaned toward me, whispering, "Is she seriously trying to turn this into a courtroom drama?" I whispered back, "If it helps her ego, yes." Karen cleared her throat and glared at us. The homeowners in question are the Harris family. Their vehicle was left parked on the street overnight in violation of Section 4B of our HOA regulations. Despite being fined, they refused to comply and even mocked enforcement attempts. This undermines the harmony of our neighborhood. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodded. Others rolled their eyes. Karen pointed a finger directly at Emily. "Do you deny leaving your car out overnight?" Emily folded her arms. I did it. But the fine was ridiculous and unfair. Gasps echoed through the room, like she had just confessed to a crime. Karen's smirk widened. "Then you admit to breaking the rule. Members of the HOA, we must decide what punishment is suitable when homeowners openly flaunt their disregard for our bylaws." I stood, my voice calm but firm. "Karen, with all due respect, you're overstepping your authority. HOA boards exist to maintain common areas, not to intimidate families with sham trials." Karen slammed the gavel again. "Order, this isn't about me, this is about preserving community standards. And if a judge can't follow the rules, what does that say to everyone else?" She gestured dramatically to the board members. "I move that we escalate this violation to maximum penalties, daily fines, property liens if necessary. Whatever it takes to enforce compliance." Gasps filled the room again. One board member cleared his throat nervously. "Karen, maybe that's excessive. Usually we'd send another notice, not..." Karen cut him off. "No, this is about principle. We can't let them get away with it." Emily rose to her feet, her patience gone. "This is harassment. You're not protecting the community, you're bullying it," Karen sneered. Spoken like someone who thinks she's above the law. That's when I decided enough was enough. I pulled a folder from my briefcase and laid it on the table in front of the board. "Since Karen insists on turning this into a courtroom, let's treat it like one." This folder contains complaints from 10 other neighbors who filed grievances against Karen's abuse of authority, intimidation, selective enforcement, even harassment. The room went silent, eyes widened. The board members glanced nervously at Karen. Karen's face drained of color. That's irrelevant. This is about you, not me. But the murmurs rising in the room told a different story. For the first time, the crowd wasn't looking at me. They were looking at her, and they didn't look pleased. The silence in the clubhouse was deafening. Karen's gavel, once her symbol of control, now sat motionless in her trembling hand. For the first time since this ridiculous trial began, her confidence cracked. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, people shifting uncomfortably, whispering to one another. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, one of them, a quiet man named Richard, spoke up. Karen, is this true? Have you been targeting residents unfairly? Karen shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Of course not. This is a distraction. Harris is manipulating you. He's a judge, for crying out loud. He knows how to twist words and papers to make himself look innocent. Emily stood tall, her voice clear and steady. This isn't about twisting words, it's about truth. We've all seen how Karen operates. Fines for petty things, threats over flower beds, complaints about trash cans being out for 5 extra minutes. It's never about community. It's always about her power. Several neighbors nodded. One even called out from the back, "Yeah, she fined me for leaving my kid's bike on the lawn overnight." Another added, "She made me repaint my mailbox twice because she didn't like the shade of black." The room erupted with agreement. Voices overlapped, people sharing their frustrations. It was as if the dam had finally broken, years of resentment pouring out all at once. Karen slammed the gavel desperately. "Order, order!" she shouted, her voice cracking. But the crowd no longer obeyed her. I raised my voice above the noise. "This is exactly what I meant when I said the HOA was being abused. Karen, you claim to enforce fairness, but you've been weaponizing these rules against people you don't like. And now the community is speaking for itself." Richard looked at the other board members, then at the angry crowd. Slowly he stood. "Karen, effective immediately, I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in your leadership as HOA president." The room hushed. Karen's eyes widened in shock. "What? You can't do that. I'm the president." "Not anymore," Richard said firmly. "Board members, aye or nay?" One by one, the board members raised their hands. Aye. The decision was unanimous. The gavel slipped from Karen's hand, clattering against the table. She stood there, pale and trembling, as the weight of the room turned against her. You can't do this to me," she whispered. "I built this community. You need me." Emily shook her head. "No, Karen, we just needed peace. And now, we might finally get it." Neighbors began standing, some clapping softly, others cheering outright. The energy in the room shifted. Away from fear and toward relief, Karen's face twisted with rage, but there was no saving her throne. She stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. For the first time, her power was gone. Richard turned to me. "Judge Harris, thank you. You didn't just stand up for your family, you stood up for all of us." I nodded. It wasn't about me being a judge, it was about being a neighbor, and no neighbor should live in fear of the person meant to serve them. Emily slipped her hand into mine, her smile warm and tired. "So, do you think she's gone for good?" I glanced at the door Karen had stormed through. With people like her, they never disappear quietly. But at least now, she'll think twice before trying to rule over this neighborhood again. The room erupted in applause, and for the first time in months, the neighborhood finally felt like a community again.